morning and welcome into the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday morning. It is 8 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 5 a.m. super early morning wake-up call and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you are here. Today we are starting a segment every Tuesday called Technical Tuesday, and it's inspired by a Technical Tuesday that takes place at the club that I'm coaching at. So just using a little inspiration from the kiddos for the show, Technical Tuesday. So we're going to have somebody on each and every Tuesday to kind of talk about that. And today that is John Townsend. John is known for working and developing and having an intense focus on technical development with TVC. And he has been working with players for years, and so we are going to have him on today. We're going to kind of dive into some different aspects of technical development here on Technical Tuesday. So in the world of women's Olympic qualifiers, last night's USA Costa Rica was kind of a snooze fest from the standpoint of it wasn't a really good game to watch. Costa Rica were just severely outmatched. 6-0 win for the U.S. women's national team, the Olympic qualifying team there, and really a lot of sloppy play. And really, it's probably one of the hardest things to do when you are an athlete or you're a team and you're going up against an opponent that you outmatch, that you outclass, that you're just a much better team or much better player than them. How do you continue to find the edge? How do you continue to push yourself for greatness and excellence, rather than take your foot off the gas and kind of coast for a little bit? It's very tempting to do so. And time again, this is actually where most players fail. It's not in technical development. It's not in, being big enough or fast enough or strong enough. Where most players fail is the 6 inches between their ears. And that might be the fact that their technical development is good, but maybe it's not good enough because they didn't push themselves a little bit farther. Maybe it's their understanding of the game isn't quite where it needs to be because they haven't really taken the time to make that a priority. Every area that we look at in how good a player is really comes down to that space between your ears. And when you look at teams, when they're outmatching, just quality level is just completely on different levels. How do you continue to get yourself up? The U.S. women's national team and the program has been one of the most remarkable programs in that regard. They do have their occasional, take their foot off the gas, but they have been able to kind of flip the switch. They did it in the World Cup this past summer when I, along with a bunch of others, were skeptical whether they were going to be able to flip that switch and keep it switched on because they had kind of been coasting for a little while. And CONCACAF is a region that is just not challenging for the U.S. women's national team. Really, for the U.S. women's national team, the countries they should be playing when they're not in an official like CONCACAF type tournament are the likes of Japan, France, England, Spain, Germany, Italy. There's not really teams within CONCACAF that are going to provide them a lot of competition. Most teams are just not going to be able to match them, and we saw that last night. Sloppy play at times, and you'll see that even at the lowest levels. I mean, even in the youth game, when teams know that they're better and they're able to kind of do whatever they want, they tend to raise or lower their effort level, their intensity, their focus based on their opponent. And Nick Saban, the head coach of the University of Alabama, when he came into the University of Alabama, one of the things he kept preaching, there was this kind of word, and reporters would kind of make fun of him for it, and he'd call it the process. But one part of the process that he was famous for talking about was this idea. It was this phrase that you play to a standard, not to the level of your opponent. This is something he's always trying to get into the mindset of his teams. We play to a standard. We do not play to the scoreboard. We do not play to the level of our opponent. We play to our standard. What is that standard? And for them, their standard was excellence. Their standard was, intensity. It was focus. It was effort. All the things that you would need in any type of sport, that unrelenting commitment to a standard, not allowing the distraction of a weak opponent, the distraction of, the score to keep you from continuing to do your job at a high level, to continue to bring effort, intensity, and focus to your job. That's the one area I think that is it's really, really hard to do. It's really hard to get athletes to always go there. And I think, quite honestly, for the U.S. women's national team, the head coaching job, that might be the most difficult aspect. More than anything else, more than trying to figure out the right mix and, looking at all of the player options available, more than the headaches of always trying to find quality opponents to play whenever you have the opportunity, more than all of those other kind of things. To me, that is the most difficult part of the U.S. women's national team job, which is, how do I continue to get our team to play to a standard and not the level of our opponent and not to the scoreboard? And so I'm not at all bashing the U.S. women's national team. They're the only shining light in our American soccer system right now, an ecosystem. All I'm saying is it is very difficult to go where they went this summer repeatedly, consistently. These players have been incredible. They continue to be incredible. And to stay pushing the edge, pushing the boundaries is hard. It's monotonous. It gets long. So having that commitment to that as a team is probably going to be the most difficult job for the head coach. But, they put it on again, 6-0 USA over Costa Rica. Haiti winning over Panama 6-0 as well. Two lopsided scores in CONCACAF, not U.S., but Olympic qualifying. So definitely something to see how, just you see the score line, and if you didn't watch any of the matches, go, oh, they're just continuing to roll, and they are. That's what makes that so hard to do, to continue to really, really turn it on. But that's where we find kind of the frontier of excellence, the frontier of greatness, that next edge, that next chapter, that next conquest is just over that horizon. So our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. They are always trying to look over the horizon and find something for you, create something for you, make something for you. Ducticbrand.com, DUKTIG brand.com, and you can use promo code DW Show. You'll get 10% off of your next order. That is DW Show, and you will get 10% off of your next order at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back after this. For tuning in on this Tuesday, our first in a kind of a new feature that we are rolling out called Technical Tuesday, and one of our technical gurus is none other than a friend of the show and a friend of mine, John Townsend. John, welcome to the show this morning. How are you?
I'm really good, Daniel. How are you doing?
I am doing well, other than the fact, as I was telling you off the air, that my wife said I was snoring too low to make it better, and I asked her this morning, I said, was it better for you? And she said, yes, it was so much better. And I said, good, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I barely slept a wink and felt like I woke up with somebody had punched me in my head all night. So, so we know the pillow worked for her, not quite for me. We'll try round 2 tonight and see how that goes. But anything to make the wife happy, right? So
that's right.
So we just we endure it sometimes, or at least try to, and we'll see how it goes. Today's kind of our first feature segment that we are calling Technical Tuesday, where we want to kind of always bring it back to this part of the game for coaches, for players to be able to kind of go back and learn some things every week on this aspect, not just the global ecosystem or the governance and all of those things that we cover on the show. We want to bring it back to the on the field every Tuesday, Technical Tuesday. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of get in with you, because when we look at the American landscape, and I want to stay here for just a little bit, when we look at American players, whether male or female, there is a general kind of development and pathway that's taking place in American soccer, and it's not quite getting our players fully developed to a world-class level. When you look at the size of our population, we should not be churning out one Christian Pulisic every year or two. We should be churning out dozens, if not hundreds, of high-quality players that are being able to not only play within Major League Soccer, but like Brazil, being an exporter of players around the world. So when we look on a macro level, before we get into digging into some specific techniques or technical aspects, on a macro level, where are we missing it in terms of technical development of our players?
Oh, that's a big one. I think we're missing it in a couple key components. I think that the engaged part our kids around, we line them up, we put them in these fields that look pristine, and they have all these things, but they really don't have an organic feel to it. And this is different than saying let them play without coaching. There's a way to structure this and supervise it, observe it without interfering. But I think by the time kids are developing the type of skills that are necessary on the world stage or just with their counterparts in different countries, they haven't had enough contact hours on the ball alone or with their friends in isolation. They haven't had enough, whether it's playing on the court, playing in the street, playing wherever they can. They're not dribbling the ball to the bus stop. They're not carrying a ball in their backpack. They're not finding a wall on a habitual basis. And so from the get-go, we are not front loading our young players with enough contact hours with the ball in an organic way. So there's that aspect. And then you get into the more formal years where the leagues start coming in and the games start coming. And then you have, again, hyper organization without attention to detail. Now, one of my coaching mentors, Terry Mickler, who you've had on the show, has always said the smallest things make the biggest differences. And one of the things that I have found, that I've seen and I've lived, is we want to coach at a standard where we want these players to be able to possess the ball and play out of the back and skip lines with passes and break lines and all these things, but we're not actually teaching them the foundations. And so what it really comes down to is, in this country, we use this. I really think that until that happens, where I can look out my front window at a park and I see soccer being played, we're going to still have technically deficient players from the entry point.
So what do you think it is and you don't see it as much in soccer? Why is that? Why, what, do you have any ideas as to why we are not seeing soccer players get out organically, but you'll see kids do other sports?
So the answer I'll provide is going to be one of those pockets where you see those other sports, you see it enmeshed with the culture. So it's very likely to be in an inner city environment. Graduate school is a great example. I was in graduate school in early morning classes and some of my late coursework. I would do a morning schedule, and I would go out and I'd look out the window, and I was in downtown Chicago, and I would see tons of African American kids come out there. They would play basketball. No structure to it, but as I was kind of distracted by it, I would watch them. Well, it would start as a shoot around, turn into 1v1s, then 2v2s, then 3v2s, then kind of a 5v5 at the end. And as just more players came and they rotated, it became part of what they did. It was they had Hispanic leagues, these Latino leagues, and have this great immersion into those leagues, having not been from those countries, but also being able to get coaching and having the more formal, as we know it, youth soccer experience. So I think in this country with soccer, the kind of wrap it all up is it's not part of our culture in certain sub pockets of our population. I think by the time it does become popularized or structured, there's already too many barriers to entry that drive people away, or there's not enough education at the grassroots level, or there's not enough presence, maybe that's the better word, for people to say, hey, my kid likes soccer. He likes Ronaldo. He likes Messi. He likes Mbappe. But that's all he knows. I mean, he gets it on YouTube, but there's no presence in a certain rural area, for example, or inner city area that is prominent enough to actually hook that player and retain their interest and make it fun. I think by the time they get to soccer, there's already uniforms and lines and Capri Suns and orange slices, and it's almost like it's geared toward the parent and consumer. And I'll just use ROI, like parents want a return on the fee that they've paid. So you bring in pay to play and some other things. And then you create these filtration gateways that will filter out a lot of players. Now, I've always argued that what we see on our national team level on both the women's and the men's side are probably not the best players. They're the ones who are either the most resilient, the most fortunate, the most affluent. And yes, I mean, they are a great level of ability, but we're probably canceling out a whole bunch of others.
Current education in this area.
That's a great question. I think the Federation should, well, if it really wants to change I would say turn the aircraft carrier around, it really needs to start at the bottom. And we've always argued this as advocates for an open system and people who want a more repeatable and scalable model of what goes on around the world. This comes down to a process versus procedure conversation with the Federation. I think the Federation, they know the process. Like, if I give the Federation a problem to solve, let's say, here's a model, I want you to build it. And they know that the model has pieces and they need to put it together. They'll never be able to build it to spec without understanding the procedure. So the steps. So you can understand a process, but without explicitly without a degree of specificity, you're going to miss the important pieces and steps. And this cannot be overlooked or undone. And so what's happening is they're saying, yeah, we have these outreach groups, we have these diversity committees, we have these presence in the inner cities. That's process. What are those things doing? What's the procedure? What's the day-to-day? What is where can I go as a parent of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, knowing that they're going to probably play soccer at some point in the next 18 months, at least the 3-year-old will, at least introducing them to a formal aspect of the game. Where can I go to get education on that? What if I didn't play the game and I'm completely new? I'm a hockey parent, or I'm a basketball parent. What you think the game should do with what they know from their community and what they represent in their cultures? And you probably have a winning combination, a good formula there. But if you go in and say, well, we're U.S. Soccer, here's our stamp of approval, this is my way or the highway. Well, what if your way's not working? It hasn't worked. We look at our national team game, it's a mess. Look at the Federation, granularly, it's a mess. So I think that if U.S. Soccer wants to do damage control and actually rectify and turn the aircraft carrier around, it has to engage at that grassroots, community-based level. And it has to do it where they listen first. They don't just go tell. They're not in charge. They serve the people. I think people need to understand that. The Federation serves you, me, your son, your daughter, your coaches. We don't work for the Federation. It is here to work for the good of the game. And I think until we have that mindset in this country, we're going to continually run into these roadblocks that, in my opinion, with the infrastructure, the population, the great sporting culture we have already in place, we should not be losing this battle. And I think that the Federation is just completely out of touch with itself, its employees, and then with the communities that it should be serving.
Here, I agree. I couldn't agree more with that. I want to look at one of the Benoit, tactical setup and trying to play out of the back and open up and provide space. For our first day, really kind of going through that structure, they saw a lot of really good results. The kids did pretty well with that. One of the things that was really driving me crazy was the fact that watching them open up and play, the passes were not crisp and firm. There was no thump on the ball, and you know what I mean when I use that word. And yeah, I know they're 9 and 10 years old, but there's a difference between a touch pass that I would call very anemic and weak versus a firm pass, even at that age. And one of the reasons why I want to go here first is you spent time in your childhood and have been very influenced by Dutch soccer. You've been over, you trained as a kid. You've done many trips over there. I know Terry's a big fan of that as well. And when you watch Dutch kids at this level, when they go to pass and receive the ball, there's usually accompanied by that thump sound. It moves. It is part of the culture to make sure that pass gets where it needs to go, and it really forces the player on the other end to really work on set.
As you pass responsibility, not the ball, you're just kind of kicking it out there, hoping something good happens. What it comes down to is confidence, intentionality, and then repetition. When I grew up, I was very fortunate to have the same mindset that I had in other sports. I took it to soccer. Now, I loved basketball as a kid, and I loved ice hockey as a kid, and a lot of the skills that I trained there were in isolation. So jump shot, a 3-point shot, free throws. And again, this sits in the opposed, unopposed. But when I went to Holland and in the Netherlands, we exclusively trained with grids. Grid works. We knew spacing, we knew distance, we knew pace. We knew positioning. We had markers. We knew how to pass to the front foot, how to receive on the half turn, just things that they didn't really drill into us in terms of joysticking. It's just you stand here, the ball travels across the grid this way, you follow your pass to this point, and it became a rhythmic, repeatable, scalable activity. Now, Terry has a great story, and this is something I experienced. There's a drill that I've talked about before where two players were passing the ball to one another in Holland, and they brought two more players in, and the game was to drive the ball about 30 yards in the air, have one player receive it, lay it off the other player, that player lays it back off, and they drive it back to the other team. It's a little island game where you just driving the ball. They said American players got mentally exhausted at the first or second mistake, where it's go, how does it hit, at what speed. Like, that's what the Dutch do. They deconstruct the game to the procedural level, and then what you see on the screen or on the sideline is the process. But what people are seeing when they're playing is the procedure. Players aren't thinking of the process, they're thinking of the next step. And I think we in our coaching methodology here in the States, we're skipping steps, and we're trying to build that model to scale. And I said, you can't do that until you actually understand. Like, I think here we build players, and then we look at all the missing pieces. Like, it's like a puzzle, right? It's like I finished the model, but I have all these missing extra pieces. Well, they're not extra; they're just not included. So when you get to the national team level, you get to the college level and the DA level, it's deficient, and it's exposed really quickly when you go play against teams from Europe or South America or wherever. And I think that's where we need to kind of understand that there's a mindset here, and I'm going to mention two terms that are really important. People will probably get on me about this, but I don't really care. The deliberate play, which is intrinsically motivating, designed to maximize fun and enjoyment, provide immediate gratification, and it requires minimal equipment. It's a ball, you go play, and there's really flexibility in rules and tactics and participant sizes and ages. It's free play. And then there's deliberate practice, highly structured activity that requires effort, guarantees no immediate gratification, no immediate results, is motivated by the goal of improving performance rather than inherent enjoyment. So deliberate practice means you're doing things without a reward. You're doing them at high reps, high frequency, high intensity. But what ends up happening is if you can mix the two, deliberate play, that enjoyment free play, with deliberate practice, you're going to get a complete player, because they're getting the both sides of the have a high standard. Like, I don't think Liverpool practices casually. I think they practice way more intensely than they do in match play, and it shows. I think that's just one of these things where we think we can rise to the occasion in this country. It's an American romanticized thought. No, you fall to the level of your training, and we get it right in all the other sports, but in soccer we tend to fall short here. So
yeah, I mean, it's funny that you go there, because trainers Each team had two. We gave up 3 goals for the day, 1 in each game, and 1 in 3 of the 4 games. The other was a shutout. All 3 goals were our mistakes, where I'm trying to get them, to play through their goalkeeper and switch to the other side, and where we'd only had 4 training sessions, and they're still learning and executing, and I expected mistakes. As a matter of fact, I had already sent an email to the parents like 2 days before the matches, when I sent out the rosters for the weekend, to say, oh, by the way, I expect this weekend to have, a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning moments. We did it, and I had so many kids scoring hat tricks. I don't even know what our scores were. I know the goals we gave up, but I don't know how many we scored, right? And I'm saying all this to say that when we came into last night's training session, and this is where I wanted to set up for this, the kids kind of came in and they were like, feeling really good about themselves. And I had talked to my assistant coaches after the matches over the weekend, and basically said, hey, here's some things I saw. We need to make sure we focus on a couple of these things this week, to keep tightening up the reins, focus on the details. There's some things we got to get better at, etc. And the players came in last night kind of, reading their own press clippings, and so one of the things, as I mentioned a few moments ago, was last night's focus, and it will be all week and going forward, is firm, crisp passes. I really want to see that become ingrained into their technique and their technical development, where that at 9 and 10 years old is corrected, and they know how to pass and receive the ball in a positive and correct manner. Last night's session was very frustrating for a lot of them, and part of the frustration was this lack of intensity, lack of kind of some surface level answers. Well, because we passed the ball well, or I was like, said no. The main reason why the matches were easier this weekend is because our training sessions are so intense. We ask you to focus, to work, to help each other, to talk, to shift off the ball, to make good, firm, clean passes. But you have to do all of this and do it with effort, like you've been doing. If you train really hard there, then, and I actually use Liverpool as an example, a team like Liverpool doesn't play the way they do in their matches without having that be a part of their culture and DNA and their training. It doesn't work. If you guys think you can take it easy during training sessions and then just show up and play a match, it's going to be a lot harder going forward. And so, when you're looking at environments where training's taking place, how important is it for coaches to always stay turned on, coaching details, encouraging, the competition, encouraging the players to focus on getting the technique right? How important is it when you have your coaching hat on to create and provide these environments for players to be able to, take their game to the next level rather than just easy
fun, who's coached themselves and been coached well by how their teams play. If you have a coach who's ranting and raving and going crazy on the sideline on game day, they've done nothing productive during the week. And I think intensity is different than aggression. So that's, get that out of the way right now. It's okay to be intense. Aggression is a whole different animal. And I grew up with coaches that were very, very abusive with their verbal. They were personal with their attacks. They yelled. They didn't really give instruction. So I tell coaches that I work with, players are going to listen to the delivery, not the message. So understand that. How you carry yourself, how you present yourself. If you're on the sideline on Twitter they're not going to really see that you're engaged. If you're not interested in them, how are they going to be interested in what you want them to do? If you can't manage yourself, how can you manage others? So I think high level, good competitive coaching, regardless of age, regardless of country, regardless of environment, has to do with the coach's identity. If you look at, Liverpool's a great example. Those players have a Jurgen Klopp identity in their DNA now. Like, they will run through a wall for that guy. And at the end of the game, even win or lose, it's hugs, smiles, and there's an intensity that still carries throughout that presentation on the field. And I can only imagine behind closed doors what that looks like. But those players aren't fearful. They're not unwilling to make mistakes. They just work for him. They work for each other. And I think as coaches, we have a responsibility to, one, educate ourselves and our players that life and soccer philosophy the first time they concede a goal. They turn into that rabid animal that's running up and down the sidelines joysticking. It's like, well, your philosophy should kind of account for this. So I think that too many coaches are practicing performance art. They're saying what they think they need to be saying. They're throwing cliches out. They're being cheerleaders, and not enough are living and breathing and understanding the process and the procedure. And I go back to that because that's really what it comes down to. When you're coaching, Daniel, you know this. You understand what you want to do in a high level, but those players, they think maybe 10 seconds ahead and they forget 10 seconds behind them. I mean, they're kids. Their prefrontal cortex isn't even developed yet. So you have to get down to the procedural level with them, get to their level, and make them understand with, the right tone, but also the right delivery of that message. And I think a coach and their identity and their engagement is everything. I've had coaches that were former pro players that still acted as though they were part of training. They still acted as though it was their training, and they were the best coaches I ever had. I've had coaches who treated it like a chore, and results were, so did we. And I think there's a lot to be said about coaching education, parent education. And again, this goes back to the first point we made. What can we be doing as a culture to engage the game, and how can we represent our cultures best through the game?
Yeah, and when I'm looking at like last night, and talking down in different ways and doing different things, but is it building towards what you want to do on the weekend? Like, how do you want your teams to really play? Are you setting that environment and that expectation and creating the opportunities of technical development within there in order for your players to improve to a level where they can execute what you really want to do on the weekend? I think a lot of times we don't have enough intentionality in the way that we plan our training sessions and the focus that we give to ensuring our players are, in environments where they're asked to really work and focus and learn and be productive and play. I know a lot of in recent years, a lot of clubs have kind of used this similar analogy to teachers and classrooms, and the field is our classroom and the coach is a teacher, and we're trying to teach your kids. And I've heard these kind of buzzwords and these phrases over the last few years. I don't know if you've heard these as well, but in kind of seeing that and hearing that. When our kids go to school, we expect obviously fun. We expect the engagement. We expect the enjoyment, but we also expect the structure, and that the teacher's got a plan, and that they're going to lead them through the player to my right or to my left or ahead of me. Why is it important for me to always be, checking my shoulders to take a picture of my surroundings so I know who's where and be able to anticipate better whether I may or may not have time on the ball or pressure. Not always relying on a teammate to tell me. All of these aspects, to me as coaches, these are the things that we've got to be intentional about creating the environments in the team setting. Individual, it's easy to kind of, jog around with a ball and check your shoulders, but it's not the same intensity or focus level as if there were 2 or 3 players around and they're chasing you trying to get the ball and you're trying to have to work in kind of the opposed setting. So there's some things that in an unopposed where you're working on specific technique and different things that you know, ball on a wall, as you and I are big fans of, is different than when we're in a training environment and coaches have this opportunity to create and set up environments for players to really learn and understand the game. And for me, you know, I go back to this example that I was, you know, using with the team last night. You're passing and receiving, and the focus on that detail is the difference between
one country that tries to expedite process. We covet results without respecting the process. And it's kind of like the Nick Saban thing, right? This is our standard. We don't fall below the standard. We meet or exceed. I think that mentality is absent in a lot of coaching circles in this country. If you look at Ajax, it's a great example, and I'll kind of get to the question in a second. Their best players are their youth coaches now. Like, they're retired. They don't just give them the first team job. They put them down with the youth players, make them relearn the game from the youth level at a new generation. And those youth players get the privilege and honor of getting Dennis Bergkamp or Mark Overmars as their youth coach. They're learning their trade as well. They recycle and relearn. They're lifelong learners. So that's like a coaching and a teaching phrase. So there's that, being a student of the game. So that all comes down to intentionality. I think when it comes down to designing a plan or working with a group or even an individual, you have to understand a couple things. There is being present, and then there's being there. I think a lot of times we just show up and expect, well, I showed up, I'm here. It's like going to the gym. Like, did you actually do anything, or did you go to the gym? You can say I went to the gym and people think you worked out. Well, you didn't do anything. Intentionality is, what am I going to get out of this input? And if you put in poor inputs, you're going to yield a bad output. It's very simple. One of the things with coaching that I have found, and I did it wrong for a lot of years because I thought I knew everything as a former player. I didn't have good coaching education or good experiences being coached myself growing up for many years. So I just thought, wow, I'll just train these players with what I know. Fresh in my mind what that session was all about. I even may get my phone out and record a video or just talk to myself about it, self-interview, self-monitor. So I know that the intentionality is never lost. I want this player to do the simple things well if it hurts. Like, I know players that they laugh at passing 10 yards, like kind of what you're describing, moving the ball, circulating it. Well, do it for 20 minutes without stopping, and we'll see who's laughing, because at 6 minutes, you may be exhausted from that simple movement, but that's the standard. You look at the great teams at any level, but you look at the great teams, they play to a standard. They don't fall below it. They meet it and exceed. And I think that guarantees intentionality. I also think that we try to accomplish too many things in a single session. That's one thing that I've learned as a coach. We're going to focus on 2 or 3 core things. And if we get 4 or 5, great. But we can't expect to be Barcelona tomorrow. And we can't expect that players can't receive the ball to feet. They can't play at the back. So how do we mitigate this? Well, we have to actually deconstruct the game. And the intention is we're going to learn how to pass that pace to the right foot at the right time. And that's going to be what we do for the majority of the session. And then we'll introduce some competition, some opposition. But the whole thing is, in this country, we cut corners with everything. We, everyone's got like the fad, 8-minute abs. It doesn't work that way. You have to do it for a lot of months. You have to do, there's other factors. Same thing is true with soccer. We can't just ignore the simple things. We can't laugh at the simple things. I got slammed 6 pride about it, then we're both wasting our time. It's like, that's what I really think people need to get at, is to value what they do in the game, because you don't get to play very long. Same with coaching. You don't know how long you're going to be able to do these things. So setting intentions and seeing them through, it's incredibly important, but until you can deconstruct how you're going to do it, you're kind of blowing smoke.
Completely. And I completely agree. Why you have this all or anything else. How we play, and for me, in my mind and in my mindset, how we play means a standard. That we are working towards a standard. How we play matters more than results, more than who scored what goals or what have you. How we play, and the feedback that I got from the weekend player that they can be. Has always got to have that thought sitting in the back of their mind. How do I do this and how do I do it better? Playing and training with intentionality is so important. John, thanks for joining the show as always. You've always got great insight into technical development and in the technical components of the game as well as coaching. How can people connect with you on social media?
The easiest way is through Twitter. So my main handle is John JON Townsend 3, and then my coaching platform is TVC. It's at HUP TVC, Hup TVC.
All right, so you heard it here first. Check out John and his work. And John, thanks for joining the show as always. Really do appreciate it, and we'll have you back on again real soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Anytime.
That is John Townsend, and I really appreciate him spending some time with us today. Speaking of spending some time, if you have a moment today, go to charitywater.org and join the project, join the story of providing clean drinking water to people that need it. It changes their lives. It's more than just getting them clean drinking water. It's changing their entire futures, and you can be a part of that story at charitywater.org. We'll be right back after this.
We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Big thanks to John Townsend for joining the show today on our first segment of Technical Tuesday, where we dig into different parts of technical development. Today we went in a few different directions, macro, micro, looking at different aspects of technical development, the importance of focus and intensity in the technical development. Look forward to bringing you more ideas about technical development in the weeks to come with this new segment. As always, you can watch the show on Facebook, facebook.com/WRKMN, on Twitter. You can watch on YouTube at danielworkman.com. Catch me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Workman. Hope you have a great day. We'll see everyone again tomorrow.